Hey, welcome back. Hopefully that exam one went quite well for you. Let's start module two. So module two, we're going to cover chapter four. So 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, and then we're going to jump over to chapter six and do 6.1 and 6.2. So that's what our module two consists of. So module or chapter four is all about linear regression and looking at scatter plots and trends of lines, stuff that you have seen in algebra one and algebra two. Okay, I'm just going to give you some new information, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into it than what you would have normally done in algebra one and algebra two. Okay, so first things first, though, we have to talk about visualizing with scatter plots. We have to talk about, basically scatter plots, do's and don'ts and all that stuff, what we look for. So that's really what section 4.1 is all about. So let's get started. In this one, I'm going to show you how to do scatter plots on your calculator, and I will also show you how to do scatter plots in sorry, it's slipping my mind. StatCrunch. Gosh, I don't know why that slipped my mind. I like StatCrunch a lot. So, visualizing scatter plots. Well, if you don't know what a scatter plot is, you're going to see it very, very soon. But scatter plots, in general, what they do is they are a display for examining two variable relationships. Now, what's very important about these two variables must be numerical, no categorical. Okay? So it is a display for examining two variable relationships. Both variables are numerical. Okay? Now, when we talk about these, there are three things that we're going to look at in a scatter plot. Kind of like when we dealt with histograms and all those, we talked about the center, the shape, and the variability. That's all the same kind of stuff that we talk about with the scatter plot, although they have slightly different names. Okay? So in a scatter plot, we're going to talk about the trend. So that's like the center. Okay? Then we're going to talk about the strength, and that's the variability. Okay? And then last but not least, we will talk about the shape, which, of course, shape is shape. All right? And really what well, when we get to shape, I'll talk about it there. So these are the three things we want to look at: the trend, the strength, and the shape. And again, it's like the center, the variability, and the shape. All those same things, just now we're gearing it towards a scatter plot. Okay? So the first thing is, here's a scatter plot. So you can see that what you're looking at here, these are the median age of marriage for women versus the median age of marriage for men. Okay? So they're comparing two numerical data values. All right? And basically, each one of these points represents a married couple of when the female, comma, the male got married. That's how these points are all set up. Okay? It is the women, comma, the men. And each point is a couple. All right? A married couple. So that's where all these points are. And that's what you're looking at. When you are dealing with scatter plots, it's very important that when you look at these relationships, you're pulling from the same group. Like, I wouldn't want to pull a woman's marriage or the age a woman got married and then put it with another male and his age. That doesn't make any sense. So the way these points are, each point represents a married couple. Okay? And how old they were when they got married. All right? So we don't mix and match our data. Our data information should come in pairs, and those pairs, there's a reason why they're paired together. Okay? So there we go. So again, this is what a scatter plot looks like. It's just a bunch of dots. Okay? So that means when we go to our calculator or when we go into StatCrunch, we're going to be using two columns. And it's going to be very important that we make sure all the numbers are in the proper order in their column. So whatever the first number is, match it for the first column matches up with whatever the first number is for the second column because there's a rhyme and a reason for that order. All right. So again, this is what a scatter plot looks like. And that's what everything in 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, this is what we're going to be talking about, scatter plots. So the first thing is trend. Trend, what we're looking is, well, basically, let me give you the definition. A trend is the general tendency of the scatter plot as you scan from left to right. And what we're talking about in tendency is are the dots going up? So are they increasing from left to right? Or are the dots going down, decreasing from left to right? Okay? So really there are two trends that we talk about. We talk about a positive association, so the dots are increasing from left to right, or we talk about the negative association. The dots are decreasing from left to right. Okay? Think of these trends kind of like the slope. Like, what is the sign of the slope? If the slope of the dots is positive, that's a positive association. Okay? Again, that would be an increasing line from left to right. If the slope is negative of a line, okay, that would be a negative association. In other words, it should look like it's decreasing from left to right. The dots are going down from left to right. Okay? Got some examples here. So on here, tell me which ones are which ones in here are increasing, which ones are decreasing, and which ones have no trend. And go. Okay, so hopefully as you look at this A, this is what we call that positive association, because as we move from left to right, the dots are trending or increasing. So this would be a positive association. Okay? B is what we call the negative association, because as we move from left to right, it's going down. Okay? So this is a negative association. The two that are down here, these are those weird cases that can happen. Okay? So this one is what we would call no trend, because this is just a huge scattering of dots. Okay, it looks like there's no rhyme or reason. It just looks like a bit like you went to the gun range and you had a little machine gun. And you're like, yeah, there's no rhyme or reason for it. Okay, then over here, this is what we call a changing trend. But again, we don't really like this. We want our trends to either be positive associations or negative associations. This is what we call a changing trend. Okay? And the reason why we call it changing is because if you look at it, as we move left to right, at first it's a negative association. Then all of a sudden it swings towards a positive association. So that's a changing trend. Again, in this unit, in the module or chapter 4, we want to look at positive and negative associations. These we're going to tend not to do a lot with, okay? And again, you'll know why here in just a second when I talk about shape, okay? So these are those associations, those trends that we're talking about, all right? We like positive associations. We like negative associations. We don't like it when there's no trend or there's changing trend, okay? And this should be changing trend, not change trend. Okay? All right. So I don't think I have anything. Nope, nothing down below. All right, moving on. Strength. Okay? We have a whole section on strength. So we're just going to talk in general right here because section 4.2 is all about strength. All right? But right now I'm just going to give you the overview. So the strength, what you're going to do is you want to look at the degree of the scatter in the plot. Okay? The degree of the scatter in the plot. And what I mean by that is a strong scatter plot, okay? A strong, when your strength is strong in a scatter plot, has points that are scattered closely together vertically, okay? I'll show you what I mean by this in just a second. The weaker the strength, the further the points are from each other vertically. Okay? So points more compact and look like they form a line is really strong. When the points are separate from each other and you can kind of see a line there, that's a weak strength. Let me show you what I mean. One of these is strong, one of these is weak. Who do you think's who? That's right. This is the strong. This is the weak. Because when you look at this, you see how your dots are tightly compact together. And that's a horrible vertical line. But you see how the dots are pretty close to this line that I drew on there. If I draw that same kind of line right over here, you can see that a lot of my dots are far away from this line. Okay, so there's a lot of vertical scatter here. Okay, where in here, I mean, if you look at this vertical scatter, just for this point right here, look how long that line is. Versus, look at my vertical scatter that's right here. That's pretty short. So the larger the vertical scatter, the weaker you are. The closer you are here, like right in here, that's a pretty strong scattering right there. Okay, the closer you are towards a line, forming a line, the stronger you are. The more your line breaks apart and it's hard to see, the weaker. Okay, so for instance, if I come back to these, I would say that this is a stronger scatter plot than this one. Okay, because, and again, I know we got some weird points out here, but if you look at most of these points, there's not a lot of vertical length there. Okay, there's not a lot of variation in the sizes that happened here. Okay, where over here, if you draw in your vertical lines, those lines are pretty long. There's a lot of scatter vertically on these points. Hope that kind of makes sense. Okay. And then obviously, if there's no trend, then there's lots of scatter. It's very, very weak strength. And then we don't even talk about this guy. Okay. Yeah, if there's no trend, then that means it's weak sauce. All right. So that's what I mean by strength. You're kind of looking at how far apart are the points are. Are they really close together and it looks like it's forming that line? Or are they, forming a line, but they're pretty far apart as points go? Again, look at this. Look at the strength right there. That's a big line. They're not close together there. Versus when I'm over here, that's not a long line. Okay? Strong, weak. And then last but not least, I'm going to hammer this home. Okay? We want linear relationships. In this, when we talk about it, you are either linear or you're not. Okay? So the shape, it's the pattern formed by the points of the scatter plot. Okay? We want this. We want this to happen because we want to do a lot of exploring. When we are nonlinear, there's not much exploring that we can really talk about. Okay? So when I go back to these are what we want. These scatter plots have a shape of a line. Okay? And in fact, these would be a positive association as well. This would be a strong strength. This would be a weak strength. See how I talked about all three? We look like a line. We're weak in strength, but we are a positive association. Okay? So again, when I come back here, we can see that positive association there. We'd say it's a little bit stronger than probably what we had over here. And you definitely know that this looks like a line. The pattern looks like it's a line. Okay, same thing right here. This looks like it's a line. Now, granted, this one has a look to it. It kind of has a shape. Looks like a quadratic. But we want lines. And again, there's no shape here. Generally, when there's no trend, weak strength, there is no shape. Okay? But again, what we want linear. Linear. Our book stresses that a lot. Okay? So we want linear. But again, so our book, they either say you're linear or you're not. You're what we call nonlinear. All right? So if we look at these, you can see what I'm talking about here. These dots are nice and they form that line. That red line is what we would call the linear regression. We'll talk more about that when we get into section 4.3. Okay? But you can see that it looks like it's a line. Down here, if you look at this, you can see that this looks exponential because it starts out kind of flat and then it starts to increase. So this is what we call nonlinear. We don't like that. This is what we call linear because it looks like a line. We like that. Okay? So in the end, what you do with this information is we want to make sure that if we look at a scatter plot, we can talk about the description of the associations. Okay? A description of the relationship between the variables. Okay? So in the written description, you should always include the trend, the shape, and the strength. And these should be in the context of the data. These should be in the context of the data. And then also, you should mention any observations that don't seem to fit the general trend. So this is what we're talking about, like outliers. Okay, so if we go back, take a look at one. Is that an outlier? Nope, that's just a black dot that I had there. Let's see here, right in here. So I would talk about these. These are really weird. They don't really necessarily fit the trend. They're way far out there. Okay? So you can see that the majority of your data is right in here. But then we got these two weird ones right there. So that's what I'm talking about in number 4. That, those don't necessarily fit the trend of what is going on with your data. Okay? So some things, again, like what we were talking about. So if we're talking about the positive association that's going on here, what that means is that as the age of the car increases, what happens to its value? Or what happens to the miles driven? They increase. So as you have the car longer, your miles should increase. Obviously, this person had the car for a short amount of time and drove it a lot. Okay? Over here, this person had the car for a long time, but didn't drive it very much. Okay? So there's very little wear and tear on this car. This car, even though it hasn't been, even though you haven't had it for a lot of years, would have a lot of wear and tear on it. That's a lot of miles to put on a car. Okay? So see how I'm talking about this in terms of context of the problem, where the longer I have a car, the more miles it should have on it. Okay? Again, over here, you can kind of see this. As your literacy rate increases, the total births per woman decrease. So as your literacy rate, kind of like, the idea is as you get smarter, the less likely you are to have, to birth a baby as a woman. Interesting. Okay? So kind of like what this is saying, people that are illiterate have lots of babies. People that are not illiterate have fewer babies. Okay? It's kind of the idea of this. See, again, I'm talking in terms of the data. So that's what 4.1 is all about. So let's take a look at some problems from your homework. Okay? Oops. Going back. Hit the wrong button. Okay? So here are problems like what you're going to see in your assignment. So down below, I have some scatter plots. I got 2 of them. All right? It says both scatter plots concern assessed value of land with homes on the land, and both depict the same observations. Okay? So this is the amount of land you have, and then this is the value of the land. This is the amount of rooms you have on that. So the amount of rooms in your house, this is the value of the land. Okay? So the things that's different between this one is comparing the amount of land versus the value. This one is comparing the number of rooms versus the value. Okay? So part A says, which do you think has a stronger relationship with with value of the land? The number of acres or the number of rooms? So hopefully you said A, because we're talking about strength. That means we want very little vertical variation. And so if you look at this, all these points lie pretty close to this line. Where if you were down here trying to do that, it almost looks like there's no trend down here. So you can see there's a lot of variability there. My vertical lines are huge. So this has a stronger relationship because the dots are more closely compact in forming that line. Okay? Then part B says, if you were trying to predict the value of a parcel of land on which there is a home, would you be able to make a better prediction based off of A or B? Okay? And the answer again would be A. Reason being, because there's a stronger association here. You can see more of a line here. Where down here, this is, there's a lot of variability. It doesn't necessarily look like there's a positive association. Where up here, I could predict. So if I went out to 8 acres, I'm sure that the value of my land will be somewhere up here. Okay, probably a little bit higher than that, in fact. Probably right around in there. So if I went out to 8 and I went up, hopefully the value of my land should be more. I can predict that because this is more linear than what this one is. Okay? See, we like linear. We don't want stuff that's like this where it doesn't look like there's much of a trend. Okay? So go ahead and try this one. Pause the video, give it a shot. So it says this figure shows a scatter plot of shoe size and GPA for some college student. Does it show an increasing trend, decreasing trend, or no trend? Is there a strong relationship? Okay. Well, when you look at this, hopefully you said that the answer was no trend. Okay? Because this thing does not look like it's increasing, and it doesn't look like it's decreasing from left to right. The other thing is there a strong relationship? Well, if there's no trend, then that means this is not a strong relationship because there's no line to compare. And plus, if I look vertically, there's a lot of variability here. So is there a strong relationship? The answer is no. And again, a lot of this in your assignment, you're either doing like a multiple choice. Okay, so like I know this question that we just talked about right here, these are multiple choice answers that are down below. And in a question like this, they generally have a sentence written where you are choosing pieces of information from a drop-down menu. Okay, so kind of multiple choice, but it's a drop-down menu. All right. So go ahead, pause, and try this one. Okay, so the scatter plot shows data from the 50 states taken from the U.S. Census. Hey, we just had a U.S. Census, that we were working on. And so this U.S. Census shows the percentage of population 25 and older with a college degree or higher, and the median family income, because those are two things that they ask about in the census. They want to know what is your college degree, and then what is your median family income. So as you look at this, again, they want us to describe some things. So let's just talk about some things in general. And again, this is all multiple choice in your assignment. Notice it said the outlier is Colorado. So that's what they're talking about, this guy. Because if I look at this, as I move from left to right, it looks like it is increasing. Okay. So there's my line showing that positive association. Strength right now, strength is pretty subjective right now. Again, when we get into 4.2, we'll be able to talk about strength a little bit more and put a number behind it, an actual measure. But right now, strength is pretty subjective. So when I look at this, I would say, I think it's strong, but it's not very strong. Because again, I think we have some, as we move out a little bit more, we got a little bit more scatter. So I think it is a strong relationship, but just not like extremely strong. Okay. So I think the strength is strong, but it's not like the strongest it could be. Okay. Because like going back to something like, not that one, like this guy B, that's a pretty strong relationship. I would say this is very strong. Okay. So that's kind of like what they're asking about there. Again, multiple choice, don't freak out. And then as far as the shape, I definitely say there's a line there. It's linear. So now let's put a little bit of context behind this. So if we're thinking about all this, we definitely think there's a line there. So what that means is the percentage of those with a BA, as the percentage increases, so does the median family income. Okay. So again, this is a percentage of those in your household that have a BA and the median income of your family. Okay. All right. So, and again, these are the 50 states. So this is the percentage of those with a BA in each state, and this is the median family income for those states. I think I said that wrong a couple seconds ago. So each one of these dots represents one of the 50 states. Okay? So as the percentage increased for the state, so did the median income. All right? Now again, you got this weird outlier where it has a lot of people with a bachelor's, okay, but their median income is not very high, comparing with what everybody else is. As the state's percentage with the bachelor's increases, the median income increases. Colorado was an exception to that rule. Okay, so there you kind of hear what I'm talking about, like, in terms of everything. So there's a positive association, meaning that as the percentage increases, the median family income increases. It's strong. There's not a lot of scatter. Okay, and then it's definitely kind of got that linear, nature to it. All right, last but not least, try this one. Pause the video, go. Okay, so the scatter plot shows the number of hours of work per week and the number of hours of sleep per night for some college students. So this is how many hours they work a week, and then this is how much sleep they get per night. Okay. Does the graph show a strong increasing trend, a strong decreasing trend, or very little trend? Okay. Notice they didn't talk about whether it was strong or weak here, because when you have very little trend, that's usually weak sauce. Okay. So if you look at this, I would say, and hopefully you say, that there's very little trend. This does not look like it forms a line. It looks like there's a lot of mess in here, okay, between working no hours. Look at that variability. It ranged from 5 all the way up to 10, all the way out here to above 70 hours. Again, they're getting a good amount of sleep, but, it kind of looks like it's almost, lots of horizontal lines here. So I would say there's very little trend because it doesn't look like it's forming a line, okay? It doesn't look like it's increasing. So as I work more, I get more hours of sleep. And it doesn't look like it's decreasing. As I work more, the less hours I get sleep, because people that work less also have low hours of sleep. So I would say there is very little trend here, if any. And that is what 4.1 is all about. You're just looking at some scatter plots and talking about the trend, the strength, and the shape. Okay? Those are going to involve questions 1 through 10 for section 4.1. All right. Thanks for stopping by. Have fun.